Welcome back. The time is 3:22. You with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, breaking news from this past hour. And a leaked dossier has accused the BBC's Arabic service of minimising Israeli suffering in its coverage of the war in Gaza. The memo says allegations made against Israel were raced to air without adequate checks due to a, quote, desire to always believe the worst about Israel. Now, this, of course, comes as a report also revealed yesterday that the broadcaster doctored a Donald Trump speech by making the US president appear to encourage the Capitol Hill riots, when, of course, he did nothing of the sort. Well, let's now speak with Hadar Sela, who's the co-editor of Camera UK. Hadar, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have your company. It was bad enough yesterday. It sincerely was. And a lot of us just watching the BBC's output have suspected for some time that they have a blatant bias in favour of Palestine against Israel. We saw that with Hamas, How to Survive a War Zone, the documentary backed by Gary Lineker and a load of other lovers. We saw that with the furore over Bob Villan, the coverage at Glastonbury, and the seeming lack of any accountability after that. But this is seemingly worse. By deliberately minimising Israeli suffering and amplifying anything that paints Israel as the aggressor, is this an unforgivable new low?
New, I don't think so. I've been monitoring the BBC content since 2012, and it has become significantly worse since the 7th of October 2023, but we can't say that there weren't any problems before that either.
So you're saying this is a continuum? And, you know, I spoke with Danny Kelly, a previous BBC employee of many years, and he said something which really stuck in my head. And he said, this isn't about an individual, this isn't about a chain of command, it's actually about a mindset, it's about a culture. Do you believe there is a culture embedded into the DNA of the BBC that they're anti-Israel?
I don't know about the word culture, but I think there's definitely an organizational culture which prevents people from doing their job, basically, from doing proper journalism. And we've seen, since the beginning of the war, we've seen multiple examples of the BBC, for example, joining, conscripting to various campaigns, for example, on the topic of genocide, on the topic of famine, the whole campaign that was run against the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation supply of humanitarian aid. I think we've seen it time and time again. My colleagues at Camera Arabic have, since the beginning of the war, been exposing some really scandalous social media output from BBC Arabic employees, and very little, if anything, has been done about that. So I think there's sort of an organizational culture that as I say, prevents people from doing their actual job.
Now, of course, the BBC, and I'm trying to have some semblance of balance here, the BBC have continually complained, as have a lot of other critics of Israel, that the reason they're having to rely on Hamas data, Hamas information, is because journalists aren't allowed in to the area, into the Gaza Strip, into Gaza City. But there's a good reason for that. They might get massacred or kidnapped.
Well, yes, you know, I mean, as an Israeli, I'm not really sure I want my sons in the Gaza Strip to have to look after BBC reporters in addition to the rest of their work. But, you know, as you say, they've been pushing this since the beginning of the war. And if you look at the BBC's record, then that just doesn't stand up to scrutiny, because, you know, in 2012, we had the BBC claiming that Israel had killed the son of one of their Gaza employees, Jihad Mashrawi. It turned out to be a shortfall Hamas missile. In 2014, we had Ola Gur in the Gaza Strip saying that she found no evidence whatsoever of Hamas's use of human shields. We all know that's not the case. In 2021, I think it was, we had Jeremy Bowen visiting the north of the Gaza Strip, again with a heart-rending filmed report about some children who'd been killed. which again, actually, by the time he was there, it was already known that that was a short-fall missile. So this excuse doesn't really stand up to scrutiny.
Let's cut to the chase. Danny Cohen, he's the former director of BBC Television. He said earlier on today in The Telegraph, in response to their excellent exclusive by Gordon Rayner, he said it was now clear that the BBC was not safe in the hands of its senior managers and they should hang their heads in shame and resign. Do you concur?
I don't know about the resign. That's not for me to decide. But what I do think is that the BBC is not supplying the service that it should be supplying, that it's supposed to be supplying to the British public, and the British public pay for this service. It's not a favour that anybody's doing them, and the BBC's funding public are entitled to get what they're paying for.
OK, thank you very much for joining us on the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. That's Hadar Sela, that's the co-editor of Camera UK. Thank you for your time. Chris